Let me ask you a question that I've been hearing from leaders more than ever lately. What do I do when my team is technically doing their jobs, but the energy is gone? They're showing up, they're completing tasks, but there's no ownership, no initiative, no spark. It's that just doing the job energy. And as a leader, it can feel incredibly discouraging. You might be thinking, am I doing something wrong? Is this just how work is now? How do I motivate people who seem checked out? If you have felt this, especially post-pandemic, you are not alone. And today I want to talk honestly about what's really happening underneath this engagement and how leadership done differently can reignite energy, purpose, and growth for your team and for you. Well, hey dreamers, welcome back to your Dream Coach podcast. I'm Shayla Wey. I'm a small business coach, growth strategist, and believer that your dream life starts the moment you lead like you mean it. This podcast is all about leadership, fulfillment, and growth. And today we're diving into one of the most real challenges leaders are facing right now: motivating a disengaged team without burning yourself out or forcing motivation that doesn't stick. So let's get into it. Well, before we talk about solutions, we need to name the reality. Why is team disengagement so common right now? Well, what I found is that most disengaged teams aren't lazy. They're tired. They're disconnected. They're uncertain. Post-pandemic, people experienced burnout without recovery, sometimes blurred boundaries between work and life, loss of meaning or connection, even constant change without stability. And Gallup research continues to show historically low engagement levels, especially in small teams where emotional energy travels fast. And disengagement isn't usually a motivation problem. It's a meaning, safety, and trust problem. And so leadership matters more than ever. And so the first point I want to share with you is to stop trying to motivate and start trying to understand. What I have found is that the moment leaders try to force motivation, resistance grows. Motivation doesn't come from pressure. It comes from feeling seen, valued, and connected to purpose. Disengaged behavior is often a signal. I don't feel like my work matters. Maybe things like I don't feel safe to take initiative. I'm not clear on how I contribute, or even just I'm protecting my energy. And so when leaders get curious instead of critical, everything shifts. So simple questions change the tone. What feels heavy right now? Or maybe where do you feel disconnected? And what part of your work really energizes you? And then what drains you? So understanding always comes before inspiration. And I like to lead from a place of just really calling the elephant in the room. If you are feeling something from an employee or a person on your team, just addressing that in a way that is coming from the angle of being curious versus just trying to always fix the problem. Sometimes as leaders, we can assume what we think might be the problem, which is why understanding is always such a key part before we try to inspire and course correct. The second point is that ownership drops when clarity is missing. One of the biggest patterns I see in disengaged teams is lack of clarity, not a lack of effort. And so what I've learned is that people rarely take ownership when expectations are really vague, priorities keep changing, success isn't clearly defined, or when feedback only shows up when something goes wrong. So when clarity is missing, people default to doing the minimum required to stay safe. So some of the questions that are going to provide more clarity is going to be asking things like, well, what matters most? And giving answers to these questions and guiding your team so that they do know what matters most. What does success look like? Where do I have autonomy? How does my role connect to the bigger picture? And so leadership clarity creates confidence, and confidence fuels that initiative. So the third point is that psychological safety fuels initiative. And this is a big one. Because what I have found is that people don't take initiative when they're afraid of being wrong. If past mistakes were met with shame, public correction, micromanagement, silence, people learn quickly, don't risk it. And research from Google's Project Aristotle showed that psychological safety, so feeling safe to speak up, try, and fail, is the number one predictor of high-performing teams. And so as a leader, this shows up in how you respond when someone makes a mistake, possibly when someone challenges an idea, someone even brings a concern. And safety is going to create engagement. Fear is going to create compliance. And so we really, really want to make sure that we do create that psychological safety for our teams so that they do feel safe to take action and to step up to the next level. The fourth point is that people don't engage with tasks, they engage with meaning. So this is where fulfillment comes in, because when disengagement increases, when work feels transactional instead of meaningful. And so people want to know the bigger picture. Why does this matter? It really doesn't matter what profession that you're in or what business you're leading, is we always can bring back meaning to what we do. And how does this help people, or how does this solve a problem? And then ultimately, how does this contribute to something bigger? This doesn't mean every task is inspiring, but leadership really is about connecting the dots. And Matthew Kelly talks about this in the book, The Dream Manager, one of my favorite books, that people perform better when they feel supported in becoming their best selves, not just hitting targets. And so meaning fuels efforts, and then our efforts fuels growth. The fifth point is that leaders set the emotional temperature. And this one requires honesty, because what I found is that team energy often mirrors leadership energy. So when leaders are burnt out, reactive, disconnected, cynical, teams feel it. Even if nothing is said, leadership isn't just what you communicate, it's what you model. And so if what you want is engagement, we need to ask yourself, well, how am I showing up emotionally? Am I leading this team with intention or with pressure? And do I talk about purpose, or am I only talking about performance? Because leadership energy matters more than leadership words. The sixth point is growth stalls when people can't see a future. So disengagement often shows up when people feel stuck. And so what I found is that when people can't see growth, skill growth, responsibility growth, professional growth or personal growth, motivation fades. And so this doesn't always mean promotions. It sometimes can mean just development. And so growth can look all different types of ways. It could look as learning new skills, possibly taking ownership of different projects, just being trusted with responsibility. When employees and team members can receive mentorship or feedback, that really helps. And so when growth stops, people emotionally disengage long before they physically leave. Point 7 is that recognition builds belonging, not entitlement. Recognition isn't about trophies. And so what I have found is that people disengage when effort goes unnoticed and presence feels invisible. Recognition says, I see you. Your contributions matter. You're not just a role, you're a person. This doesn't have to be big. Specific praise, genuine gratitude, public acknowledgement, private appreciation, belonging fuels loyalty, and loyalty fuels consistency. Point 8 is that you can't pour purpose into people who are empty. And this is such an important boundary for leaders, is that what I have found is that you cannot care for people more than they care for themselves. But you can create an environment that invites re-engagement, because leadership is influence, not control. And some people will re-engage when safety is restored, clarity is rebuilt, meaning is reintroduced, and others may realize they're in the wrong season, and that's not failure. So healthy leadership allows honesty, even when the answer may lead to change. So how does this all connect to leadership, fulfillment, and growth? Well, leadership is shifting from control to connection. The fulfillment piece increases when people feel seen and valued. And growth happens when clarity, safety, and purpose align. Engagement isn't a perk, it's a leadership outcome. So if you want to go deeper into this topic, there's a few resources that I will recommend. A couple books that I have found really have helped me in this area. Dare to Lead by Brené Brown is really great for the psychological safety and trust as a leader. The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, where really belonging and leadership behavior are mentioned and taught throughout this book. And my ultimate favorite, The Dream Manager, Matthew Kelly. It's so much about purpose and personal growth, and just a phenomenal book if you're leading a team. Now, if this episode resonated with you and you want to build stronger engagement, culture, and leadership clarity, I would love to invite you into the LFG Business Academy on Skool. It's completely free. Inside, you do get access to a lot of tools to go deeper with leading with confidence, clarity, and heart. And you can find that link in the show notes. And I'd love to see you inside. So before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. Disengagement isn't a sign that leadership is failing. It's often a sign that leadership is needed differently. You don't inspire people by pushing harder. You inspire people by leading deeper. And remember that your dream life starts with the way that you lead, the way that you live, and the way that you grow. So I will see you next time on Your Dream Coach podcast.